Neighbor kept parking on my property, so I had him towed. Backstory. I'm a single mother of 2 teenage boys, living in a nice, quiet neighborhood at the end of a cul-de-sac. Every house on my street has a garage, and I'm the only one with a single car that I park in mine. Most houses on this street are family homes with at least 3 cars, sometimes more. Some park in their driveways, others on the street, but it's never been a problem since everyone is considerate and no one has ever had issues getting in and out. I tend to keep to myself. I'm not antisocial. I wave and say hello to my neighbors, but usually, once I'm home, I stay home. About 6 months ago, a larger family moved into the house to my right: dad, mom, and 3 teenagers. When they started moving in, I went over to greet them and welcome them to the neighborhood. They were friendly, and I was glad to have such nice new neighbors. This family used their garage for storage and parked their 4 cars in their driveway. I didn't know it then, but their youngest son was just a few months away from his 16th birthday. Now, onto the story. Around 6 p.m., neighbor dad knocked on my door. Here's our conversation. Neighbor dad: good evening, how are you? Me: through the screen door we're okay. My youngest came home from school with a sore throat, so I'm not sure what's going on with him. How are you, and how can I help? Neighbor dad: I'm sorry to hear that. I hope it isn't anything serious. We're okay. My son just turned 16 a few weeks ago, and I'm sure you saw the new truck we bought him. Me: yes, I did. It's such a pretty truck and big. Does he like it? Neighbor dad: yes, he does. It's what he wanted, so we got it for him. It is very big, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Let's pause for a moment. When I say this truck is big, I mean it's very big. It's an F-350. Personally, I think it's too much vehicle for a kid learning to drive, but it's not my money. Me: I don't understand. Neighbor dad: we've had complaints from other neighbors that his truck is so big they can't get around it when driving through. We're afraid it might get sideswiped if he continues to park on the street. Me: yeah, I've had some intense moments trying to get around it myself, but I'm sure he'll get better at parking as he gets more experienced. I'm not sure what this has to do with me. I haven't complained. Neighbor dad: I know you haven't, which is why I was going to ask if he could use your driveway to park since you don't use it. Me: I do use my driveway when I leave and come home. I can't get to my garage without using my driveway. Besides, I have issues with depth perception, and your son's truck is so big it will take up most of my driveway. I don't want to be responsible for any damage that might happen while it's on my property. Neighbor dad: we'll make sure he parks so that it allows you to come and go without any issues. Me: that isn't possible. The only way he can park to allow me to get around him is if he parks halfway on my lawn, and that wouldn't work because he would damage my lawn. If you're concerned about his truck getting damaged, why don't you let him park in your driveway and one of your smaller cars can park on the street? Neighbor dad: we've already discussed that. We would have to park 2 cars on the street for him to use the driveway. It would be very easy for him to park in your driveway, and I assure you it will not be an inconvenience. You don't even use your driveway. Me: I'm sorry, but the answer is no. I'm not going to be responsible for his vehicle on my property, and I need to be able to come and go without worrying about someone else's property. Neighbor dad: you're not being very neighborly. I thought you were a nice woman. You don't use your driveway, and this would benefit the whole neighborhood. Me: listen, I told you no, and I do use my driveway every time I pull into my garage and every time I leave. I'm sorry you don't have enough parking for all your vehicles. It's not my problem that you bought a vehicle that doesn't fit your property. Now, while I also find it irritating to navigate the road with that truck in the way, it is public parking, and I deal with it. I will not have anyone else's vehicle parking on my property. Now, if you don't mind, I have a sick kid and need to get back to him. Have a good day. I closed the door and saw him give me the bird before he turned to leave. I shook my head and had to take a moment to process that conversation. I then loaded my son into the car and took him to minor emergency to get checked out. All tests came back negative, and I was told he probably had a run-of-the-mill virus and to keep him home for self-care. The next day at work, I told my co-workers about my neighbor's request. One suggested I send an email to my HOA to document what happened, just in case. I took her advice and sent an FYI email during lunch, explaining the situation. The HOA responded the next day, acknowledging my email and noting my property rights. The first incident. Friday evening, my youngest son's condition worsened. Around 7 p.m., I decided to take him back to minor emergency. I opened my garage door and was shocked to see the F-350 sitting in my driveway, blocking me. I was furious. I stomped over to my neighbor's house and banged on their door. Neighbor mom answered, looking irritated. Neighbor mom: can I help you? You're interrupting our dinner. Me: your son is parked in my driveway after I told your husband he couldn't. I need to take my son to minor emergency, and that truck is blocking me in. Neighbor dad walked up behind his wife. Neighbor dad: he isn't blocking you in. You can get around him. Me: no, I can't. Move the truck, or I'm calling the police and a tow truck. I need to get my son to a doctor. Neighbor dad: he's not blocking you, but I'll have him move it. Me: it doesn't matter whether you believe he's blocking me or not. He's not allowed to park in my driveway. If I find an unauthorized vehicle parked in my driveway again, I'll have it towed without knocking on your door. Neighbor son arrived with his keys, and I turned to leave. I heard him call me a BH, but I ignored it. He finally moved the truck, and I took my son to minor emergency. While waiting, I sent another email to my HOA, explaining the incident. The second incident. Saturday evening, my oldest son started feeling sick, and I was also starting to feel unwell. We stayed in all day Saturday and Sunday. Sunday evening, around 5:30 p.m., my oldest son spiked a fever, so I took him to minor emergency. The only open clinic was on the other side of town, so we drove 20 minutes, waited 3 hours to be seen, and another 45 minutes to see the doctor. He was prescribed an inhaler and told he had a virus that needed to run its course. We got back home around midnight, and I was exhausted. I rounded the corner and saw the truck sitting in my driveway again, blocking me. I was so mad I could hardly see straight. I found a 24-hour tow truck service, explained the situation, and they said it would take about 30 minutes to arrive. I walked my son inside and put him to bed, then took a picture of the truck in my driveway, partially on my lawn. The tow truck arrived around 12:30 a.m. Surprisingly, my neighbors didn't come out. The driver left with the truck without incident. I sent another email to my HOA with pictures and an explanation, then went to bed. At 6 a.m., I woke up to someone banging loudly on my door. I knew it was neighbor Dad. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I looked through the peephole and saw neighbor Dad and his son at my door. Here's what happened. Neighbor Dad, yelling, "Where's the truck?" Me, I was calm, it was towed. Call such and such company to arrange getting it back. Neighbor Dad, you didn't have the right to tow it. You're going to pay to get it back. Me, I had every right to tow an unauthorized vehicle on my property. I told you not to park on my property, and you did it anyway. I won't be paying anything to get it back. Neighbor Dad, you stole my truck, UFBH, and I'm calling the police. I'm going to sue you. Me, go ahead. I'm sick and going back to bed. I closed the door, locked it, and went back to bed. Around 9 a.m., I woke up and saw 3 missed calls from neighbor Dad and a voicemail. The voicemail was him screaming about calling the police and me being a fat BH. The police showed up around 10 a.m. The officer, "Good morning, ma'am. Are you the one who had the truck towed?" Me, "Yes, I am. It was unauthorized, parked in my driveway, blocking me, and partially on my lawn. I told them previously not to park on my property and that I would have it towed if they did." The officer, "They said you didn't give them a warning." Me, "I have emails to my HOA and a video of me telling them last week not to park in my driveway. Let me get it." I got my phone and showed the officer the emails and the video. The officer, "That's good enough for me. If they bother you again, give us a call. I'll talk to the neighbors and explain the property laws." Me, "Thank you, officer. Sorry for the trouble." The officer, "No problem. Have a good day." I emailed the HOA again, explaining what happened. They responded, assuring me they'd follow up with the neighbors. Since then, I haven't heard from my neighbors, and their cars have remained in their driveway. It's been peaceful. Update. I know a lot of you have been wanting an update, but I wanted to wait until I got a copy of the police report before I did, which I got this afternoon. Sadly, it didn't go anywhere. I was kind of hoping that he would have a false report charged against him, but the report states that neighbor's son told neighbor's dad that he parked it in the street in front of my house, and that is why he called the police. The officer had questioned both of them after he spoke to me, and that is when his son said he had lied to his dad and had actually parked in my driveway. I guess they don't believe he did it intentionally, so no charges were filed, and the report was closed. I don't believe it, but that's how it goes. The trespassing report I filed has not been closed yet. I was told that if he is convicted, it is just a misdemeanor, and he would have to pay a fine, maybe 10 days in jail, or community service. Also, it would be the son who would be listed as the trespasser, and since he is a minor, I'm not sure where that will go. But I discovered that if he is convicted, I could use that to have a protective order done. I will have to follow up later on the trespassing. So, I am getting a lot of messages asking about the truck and if there has been any retaliation. Yes, the neighbors got the truck back, and no, I don't know how much it cost them to do so, and yes, he is still parking in the street, but he is parking it further down next to the entrance of the road. As far as I can tell, they haven't done anything to my property, and they haven't said anything to me since that day, although, I have gotten some pretty nasty glares and looks from them when I see anyone from their family. I was amazed by how many offers I received from all of you to help me get some cameras. This has touched me greatly. I would like to say thank you for the offers, but I am okay. I was able to talk to several of my neighbors, and I found out that my neighbors that are 3 houses from me may have been the reason that he asked to use my property. I discovered that the man who lives in that house tried to leave for work one morning. He leaves at like 4 a.m., and he couldn't get around the truck. So he banged on the neighbor's door until he finally got up and went out and moved his son's vehicle. I don't know the details of the conversation, but I know there were angry words and a veiled threat if the truck kept being a problem. Other neighbors confirmed they had made complaints to the HOA, but the HOA wasn't really helping. Apparently, some other people on the block have had other issues besides the truck since he moved in, and so this family wasn't well liked before this whole issue. Word has spread about what happened, and now there is a watch going on. I have told everyone that I would just like for things to die down and have asked that no one instigates or does anything on my behalf. I told a couple of my neighbors about this post, and one of them has a Reddit account, so she said she was going to follow the post. And no, I'm not going to post a photo or video because I don't want to risk starting anything. If there is a chance that I can go back to my peaceful existence, then that is what I want to do. If you need that information to prove this story is true, then you are free to not believe it. Also, I wasn't clear when I was talking about emailing my HOA. My HOA didn't do anything but log the complaints I was making and tell me that my property is mine and that they can't do anything about what they consider a civil matter. The reason my emails to the HOA were so important was because they contained the date, time of the information, and that matched what I had told the officer. My HOA really isn't very good. In addition, some of my neighbors have cameras. I spoke to the lady across the street, and her cameras weren't very helpful. They are at an angle and zoomed in on a bird bath in her yard. I guess she likes to watch them, and wasn't meant for security. However, the neighbor beside her went out and adjusted his cameras. He has a lot of them, and was able to cover most of my front yard and part of the side that faces him without sacrificing coverage of his property. It doesn't get my whole yard, but he was able to get the driveway. So anything going forward should be caught. I still plan to save up for some of my own, but now it isn't such a big priority. And the retired man down the street knocked on my door yesterday and gave me his phone number. He told me if I got a visit from anyone from that house again to call him, and he would come take care of it and that he would make sure to keep an eye out. So I am feeling very blessed to have these neighbors. Final update. While waiting for things to progress, I discovered from the neighbor across the street that neighbor's son had been caught parking in one of the neighbors down the street's driveway, and I was able to get a notarized statement from that neighbor about the incident and was able to include it as supporting documents on my report. Sadly, I was disappointed with the outcome at court because it ended up that he got a fine of $150, and that was it. The judge did stress that he can't just park where he wants and to be kind to his neighbors. I would also like to add that I personally haven't been bothered by that family, other than dirty looks when we're both out at the same time. Furthermore, I found out that he and his family either found this post or were told about this post and are very angry about it and have mentioned that I am slandering him and that I lied, but he hasn't said anything directly to me. I also have been able to save up for a camera system, and my ex-husband came over and installed them on my house, and he made a very big show of doing it, so I now have eyes on my property when I'm not looking. There are two good things that have happened. The first is that, after the neighbor's son was caught parking in the other neighbor's driveway, the family started playing musical cars with all their vehicles. They had been constantly moving cars in and out of the driveway in order to accommodate that huge truck, and it has been watched with delight by the entire street. I think it finally broke neighbor dad because about 2 weeks ago, they got rid of neighbor's son's truck and replaced it with a much smaller truck that can easily be parked in the street. So I feel like this is some kind of victory in itself. But the best thing that has come of this whole thing has been the older man down the street. He's the one that I mentioned in my last update that gave me his phone number and told me to call him if I had any issues. I never called him, but I came home one day and noticed that my yard had been mowed, weeded, is that the correct word? And edged. I've never seen my yard look this good. I certainly don't have the skills to do that. I was shocked, and I was thinking that maybe my ex-husband had taken pity on me and did it. Even though I knew that was far-fetched, I had to beg him for weeks to do the cameras. Before I could get settled in, someone knocked on my door, and when I answered, it was the older man. He said he had seen me out pushing the lawnmower around and lugging around a weed eater that was bigger than me, and since he had a riding mower, he decided he would save me some trouble and mowed my yard. I thanked him profusely and tried to pay him, but he declined the money and told me he liked doing yard work and didn't mind helping me out. So I took him over some chicken spaghetti that night, and he tried to refuse the meal. I told him I enjoyed cooking, I don't really, and that I wanted to show him my appreciation. This man is a widower and doesn't have family in the state, so he's mowed my yard regularly until it turned cold, and I take him over meals at least 3 times a week, and he has even come over for dinner a few times. I've talked to him in some form almost every day. I had a leaky sink, and he fixed it over my protests. I lost my grandfather several years back, and I have missed him greatly. This man reminds me of my grandfather. He tells my boys stories of his time in the military, about his kids and late wife, and gives them advice. He regularly uses the neighbor dad and his family as a what not to do, and he has become almost like my second grandpa. Thanksgiving is just going to be me and my boys this year, so I invited him over for Thanksgiving, and after much begging and persuading, he has agreed. I'm going to invite him for Christmas as well, and I have socked away some extra money, and we are going to make sure that he has a present under our tree this year. I guess I should go thank the neighbor dad and his family because their entitlement made it possible for us to have some family for the holidays. Thank you all for your support and concern, and don't worry about me anymore, I got my second grandpa looking after me.